Hello, hello, Boris. Can you hear me?
I do. You hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, that's great. Hello from Sweden to Catania. How are you?
Hello from Sicily to Sweden. More precisely from Mount Etna.
Okay, that's exactly the topic of today's little conversation. And well, I have the pleasure to and the opportunity to speak with Boris Behncke today. He is from the Volcano Observatory at Etna on Sicily. And Boris has agreed to kind of answer some of my questions about the ongoing Etna eruption and about Etna in a more general context as well. So Boris, I'm going to say a quick word about your background, if that's okay. So Boris Behncke graduated from the University of Kiel in Germany in 1996, and he received his doctorate from the University of Catania in 2000. He began work at INGV, the Istituto Nazionale di Geofisica e Vulcanologia. My Italian is not as good as yours. The National Institute for Geophysics and Volcanology, which is also running the observatories in Italy. And he began work there in 2005. And since 2010, Boris is a senior researcher at INGV. And he's a key player in the Catania branch that is observing the Etna eruption. Now, Etna started erupting in a new cycle earlier this year. And most of us have probably seen some footage on social media and in television, etc. And Etna is, of course, one of the big volcanoes in Europe. It's got a real kind of character to it. And Boris, I'm delighted to have you here so that I can ask you some questions. So if that's okay, I'll start with some questions, if that's all right.
Go forward.
Great, fantastic. So I guess the first obvious question is, so Etna has started this eruption very recently in February, I think. And could you give us a quick summary of what's actually going on, what Etna is doing, and how things are proceeding with the eruption? Because it's still ongoing, to my understanding.
There is still something going on, although it's much lower level now. There are some tiny explosions from still 3 of the 4 craters up there.
Okay.
But it's certainly giving us a break because we had a very, very intense period earlier this year. Basically, Etna has been continuously active for the past 2 years. With eruptions at the summit, initially at 1, then 2, and then again 1, and then 2, and finally all 4 of the 4 craters at the summit, because Etna is a very special volcano for many reasons, and one of the reasons is that there are 4 craters, 4 main craters at the summit, and in early 2021, all 4 craters at the summit were erupting quite vigorously, and many of them from several vents. So that in some days we had like 12 vents erupting together, which was very spectacular. And we had we were pretty certain that something bigger was coming. We feared that there would be an eruption, an outbreak from the flank of the volcano, which is the more dangerous kind of activity here. But Etna decided to make it a summit eruption, a very peculiar, intense summit eruption, which started, the most intense phase started on the 16th of February with lava fountains and a huge column of gas and ash that rose 10 kilometers into the sky and rapid moving lava flows in the summit area. So it was basically a harmless event that we call a paroxysm, a very common type of activity at Etna. And from the 16th of February until the 1st of April, we had 17 of these paroxysms. And since the 1st of April, Etna has calmed down quite a bit, and there are, as I said before, just small explosions currently taking place. And if you like, I can also show a little video, a couple of minutes, which is a sort of a summary of what we saw here from the beginning of this year and until the paroxysms of
I would love
February.
A little video, Boris. This would be fantastic. By all means, go ahead. I think, yeah, try the screen share and then it should work.
I share the screen and here we go. Let's do the screen. And here is the video. So it's got some rock and roll coming with it.
Okay, fair enough.
this was the prelude, and now come the paroxysms.
Right. That's just spectacular. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Because this explains much better than words what we saw here in that period. So it was extremely spectacular, but it was also rather intense. We had a lot of work to do, a lot of communication work. So we're pretty glad that Etna's giving us a bit of a break, which we know it will not last forever.
Fair enough, but I mean, that's okay. Did anybody get injured, get harmed,
No.
or no? That's very good. Then this was a beautiful spectacle and something that, in hindsight at least, can be enjoyed while the eruption goes on. You are, of course, very busy with monitoring and recording. I understand that. But for me, whoa, this is just a beautiful event. If no damage is done, really, then
Yes,
this is just a natural spectacle.
amazing. It is absolutely amazing. It is among the most beautiful things that you can see in a lifetime. And the only problem was the fallout, the fall of ash and little chunks of rock that we call lapilli, which fell over wide areas. And during the period, the wind shifted direction, so nearly all sectors of Etna got their share of it, which led to certain problems. Many people were. It's rather a nuisance than a real problem,
Okay.
but at least as far as the population centers are concerned.
This is actually the question I have, and I think you've actually answered the next question already on my list here. The question is, what is the biggest hazard at the moment, and particularly for the local population? And I guess since nobody got harmed, the summit eruption itself is, of course, spectacular, but it's not strictly dangerous for the population. So is ash really the main problem there?
Yes, the ash, the lapilli, what we call tephra, no, the loose material which falls and then covers everything and makes roads slippery. So it is mostly a traffic problem, but it becomes also a different problem when you have traffic driving over this material. This crushes it into fine dust, and that can become a real health hazard. So there is a great need for a systematic treatment of this material, of removal, and then also transformation of this material into something useful.
I see. And just a quick question coming to the problems with this before we maybe touch on the use of it. Is it a problem also for kind of certain industries? Because I remember when the Icelandic eruption happened in 2010, a lot of Swedish companies were concerned about their clean production. Their air filters could clog up and things like that. It didn't really come to this in Sweden because we are far away from active volcanoes. But I mean, is this a problem in Catania and surroundings?
I've not heard a lot about this actually. It is certainly a potential problem for air traffic, but it is we do not have a lot of industry. We have in Catania we do have a few enterprises that do microelectronics, but Catania is not very often affected. The problem is the fine dust, obviously, but it is mostly considered a potential health hazard, and then obviously it is quite a big mess because you have it on roofs and it goes into drainage systems.
It's clogging up everything, and if
clogging up
air
everything
filters is not the problem, the drainage often is. Yeah, so
and
I get
then
that.
it is again remobilized by rain, and so it it is a problem which needs a systematic approach. It cannot be that there will be one administrative unit, one town has, one commune, as we call them here, has a certain approach, and the commune next to it has a different one. So this is not the way it works.
I see. And what is the best thing to do with it? Is it just used for agriculture or as building material, or what can you actually do with it?
These would be the most logical usage.
Yes.
So it is certainly that material which makes volcanic areas so fertile, especially in the short term, because lava eventually also becomes fertile soil.
Yes.
But it takes a long time to weather and disintegrate. Whereas this material is already friable. It releases minerals instantly, and it holds water. So that is the most instant use, obviously. And building material, there's a lot of experimentation now being carried out. There's also a project at the University of Catania where they really study the potential of this material as building material. And there seem to be many uses. There are also other enterprises which are selling, soaps to which or peeling and creams for peeling and stuff like that, using Etna's volcanic ash. So there is a widespread use in it.
Oh, abrasion. Yeah. I think.
Yes, it's abrasive material. And it is also, certainly it would be a very popular souvenir, because we receive a lot of questions. Can this material be acquired somewhere? And actually yesterday for an article that we are writing, I looked up on the internet, and I also found that on eBay, there are people selling this material in determined bottles or containers with fancy images. So there's...
I need to come back to that, because some of the students here have gotten permission now to open a campus garden. And I asked whether I can have a little test field in the campus garden for putting some volcanic material in there to see whether the fertility increases. And what I also want to test, it's a big topic right now, that if you have volcanic particles in the soil, you might actually sequester CO2 into the soil. So the organic carbon might rise. And this is an interesting thing. So I might need to come back and get some big bag of ash from Etna.
We still got heaps of this material.
Yes, you have loads of it. I don't.
The specimens that we had here lately, this stuff like this fell on populated areas. So this hurts when it falls on you. It does not kill you, certainly. But
it's very unpleasant. I think for agriculture, you want it ideally a little smaller if you have the choice, But
the lucky thing is that this fallout this year happened in a period before the main growth period of fruits and of the flowers, and so there was not a lot of suffering. If this happened later in the spring or in the fall,
things, yes.
Just before the wine harvest, that would have done extreme damage to agriculture. So this year really went well.
This is great if it happens this early in the year. I've seen it in Indonesia that if you have ash or hot ash falling, it can actually damage the leaves of plants, and then they lose moisture, and they can dry out, and it could be really damaging the crops or in that particular year. So, but I'm delighted to hear that this was not the case this year. Now, having talked about what's going on and what the hazards are, I guess one of the big questions that always comes up is there a big hazard that might not happen very frequently, but is there sort of a black swan type thing, something that nobody has actually witnessed, but which Etna has potential for? So, or let me reword, what's the biggest conceivable problem you could actually have when Etna kind of really gears up to a big event?
Yeah, what I already mentioned is that some of Etna's eruptions come from the flanks, so from craters that open at lower elevation, and certainly some of the worst scenarios would be eruptions at very low elevation, close to populated areas or even within populated areas, which is something that has happened over and over again over the centuries.
Yes.
And many of the towns and villages which lie especially on the very densely populated southern, southeastern flanks of Etna lie around and on the craters of eruptions in the past, some of them in historical periods. So a new eruption of this kind would be certainly a massive challenge, so to say. There has been none of these since more than 350 years. So sooner or later there will be a new one, and certainly the urban setting is very different from 350 years ago. So that would be one of the scenarios.
Yes.
Another one would be.
Go ahead.
Another of the scenarios that we look at with great concern would be an eruption with extremely high output rates. So these events, they happen like twice or three times a century, and they develop extremely rapidly. They develop very long fracture systems with high rates of lava emission, so producing extremely fast-moving lava flows, and then they end after a couple of days. But in 1981, there was such an eruption, and the lava flow narrowly missed a small city. If we had a similar eruption on this side of Etna, where we have a really continuous urbanization, there would be there's nothing that can be missed. It would get something. So that would leave very, very little time to respond and bring people to safety. So that is another extreme scenario. The third one is an extremely explosive eruption at the summit, which is something that happens like every few thousand years, it seems. There has been a Plinian eruption, which is like Vesuvius in 79 AD, Pompeii, Herculaneum, in 122 before Christ. And that was the single Plinian eruption in the past 15,000 years. But 15,000 years ago, there were several Plinian eruptions. So this does happen every now and then. And that would be indeed a rather ugly scenario. So where we are really wondering how this could be managed in terms of civil defense.
This last scenario sounds indeed ugly. The first scenario, I was about to say that you just need to get Tommy Lee Jones in from the Volcano movie, and he will fix the whole problem and
Tommy
stop
Lee
the lava
Jones
flow.
or The Rock.
If they can do it in, I guess, Los Angeles, then they can do it in Catania. But no, I just joking aside, I think the vulnerability of our urban industrialized society is technically a lot higher than what it used to be some 350 years ago. So
even
I
a few
can see
decades ago here in
that,
Etna.
yes, the financial losses would be enormous, even if all the people are evacuated.
Yes.
If you think of drainage, of electrical supply cables,
Lifelines,
and all this kind of thing. I mean, oh my God! I mean, the damage. Yes, I mean.
Also, a lot of secondary hazards from like fuel deposits, gas stations, and a lot of details.
You're right. The petrol stations. Yes, I mean, oh,
when you look into the
nice
details, you really see a very complex scenario.
Yes, and of course, I mean, if one of these rarer, very explosive eruption happens, that's a major mess. I can understand that, but let's hope this is not something you're going to experience. But the flank eruption is, I hope not. The flank eruption is more conceivable, quite sort of from my perspective. It's something that I guess could happen. It's certainly a more frequent scenario than the big explosive eruption.
That's the problem. The problem is that we do have a relatively high risk because such eruptions occur quite frequently. Actually, that we've been lucky in the past couple of decades because no really serious threatening flank eruption has occurred for more than almost 30 years now. The last one that threatened the village was in 1992. Last time there was an evacuation of a village was 40 years ago, 1981. So a generation has grown without experiencing a very serious eruption of Etna, and obviously time will run out sooner or later.
Yes, this is the problem because all these timescales you mentioned, they are not human timescales. Humans, I mean, you may, when I am asked about anything beyond my grandfather, it's very hazy. I mean, so 2-3 generations and things are almost lost. If you ask me about the names of my great grandfather, I struggle. So, you know, this is exactly the problem. Not even your family. So not to mention any kind of local experiences in the region. So I see the problem. And this leads me to my final little question, and that is, because of all these things, some people claim Sicily is a bit of a dangerous place to live. But there's, of course, the other side. Volcanoes have two sides, as most of us know. There is some positive aspects, and I wanted you to maybe say a word about it. How dangerous is it really, and why is it worthwhile living there?
Well, Sicily is, I think, not a more dangerous place than any other place. Obviously, we do have another tricky thing here, which is seismic risk, because we also have some major fault systems in the area. So I would consider that the seismic risk is a much greater problem than the volcano, also because the volcano, you see it, it's always there, and you can, to some degree, anticipate eruptions. We monitor every signal, and we saw, for instance, the build-up to the activity in February, April this year. We saw that something was coming. We feared that it would be a flank eruption, but it turned out a summit eruption. But we saw the signals, and we did talk a lot to the public and administrations and civil defense in order to kind of prepare people mentally for a major event. In the case of earthquakes, the only thing that you can do is build earthquake-resistant buildings. I'm luckily living in one. This is my home here, and it is a modern earthquake-resistant building. My daughter goes to an earthquake-resistant school, which is not very frequent. Seismic risk is certainly a problem, but luckily the big earthquakes, big devastating earthquakes happen quite rarely. Apart from that, the mafia is no longer a killer organization, so don't fear that one. They're doing modern business, illegal modern business. So maybe the traffic would be a bit more of a challenge if someone tries to drive, but in the end you'll find out it's quite easy. So it's a beautiful sunny place. And then there's the volcano, obviously, which is the most densely populated part of Sicily, and the Vesuvius area, Naples area, is the most densely populated area in Europe, I think. So volcanic areas generally are extremely popular for people to live there. Why is that? Because volcanoes do offer an immense amount of advantages from being beautiful places, creating normally enjoyable climatic and microclimatic conditions. And they're extremely fertile. They provide building material. They attract tourists. So in the post-COVID-19 world, tourism will probably explode.
I want to be one of them, please. I'm dying for some field work. I really want to come. So.
Permanent invitation here.
Thank you so much.
Great fun to do that. Anyway, so there are all these advantages, which are there 24/7. They're there all the time. They're a whole life. Many people who live here in Etna have never experienced a really serious situation, but they've been benefiting from all these positive things for all their lives, day after day. So that is the point. Even more violent volcanoes do their bad things every now and then, but in the meantime, people enjoy all the advantages. So on the balance, probably the positive aspects largely surpass the bad ones. Only that the bad ones, when they get really bad, this needs to be avoided, obviously.
I think this is very well put. I think, of course, what you hear in the news is the spectacular eruptions, and the news probably also lives to a degree about making it a little serious, catching your attention this way. But the benign vineyards and fruit plantations and the beautiful kind of other products like cheeses that are kind of produced there from the goats that eat the grasses on the fertile slopes. These are all these gentle things that run in the background. They are not discussed in the news because they are not mind-blowingly spectacular.
Oh, it doesn't make the news when I take a hike in the beautiful landscape on Etna with my wife, and we sit down and watch the beautiful landscape and feel something spiritually very powerful, what volcanoes are. That doesn't make the news. It makes the news when the lava threatens and destroys, or when it is beautiful and accessible like in Iceland, even without destroying something. So then it gets into the news. But the positive aspects are they're boring. They're all the time.
Well, I don't personally
there.
think so. I enjoy them greatly, but they're certainly boring when it comes to news reporters. I think they need to report something different in order to be kind of competing with other spectacular kind of events that happen around the globe.
I see there are lots of reporters now also working on documenting life on volcanoes, on Etna. But there's a lot of interest in this now, just to show how people live, and also that they normally live very, very well. And every now and then they got some great show, and every now and then they got a little bit of but there's certainly also a little bit more of in-depth reporting, but usually this is in the late hours of the evening.
And they are longer programs. They're not strictly what happens at the 8 o'clock news.
Exactly.
More
it's
like
not
a
the
news
newsreel.
thing. Yeah.
It's not in the
no,
newsreel.
You're right. This is a very good point, that this is worthwhile reporting, and I would like to see a little bit more about that, because there's a lot of positive sides, and we haven't even talked about, I don't know about the specifics at Etna, but many volcanoes also offer geothermal power if you get the right kind of situation, if you can tap into the right aquifers, for example, etc. So Iceland, you mentioned Iceland, a lot of the heating, the district heating is done with heated waters from volcanoes. So, and these are of course big advantages, and they are there every day. You're absolutely right. So just to close off, my very kind of final question, and I haven't really kind of written this down, it wasn't planned, but I mean, there's these ancient legends, because you mentioned the natural power and the kind of spiritual aspect. There's these ancient legends about gods living inside the volcano. What's your personal take on that? Is there really a magic kind of thing happening inside Etna?
I'll show you. I'll show you what's going on in there.
Go on, please.
There he is.
Oh, wonderful.
This is the title of a... Oh, no, I didn't want to show that one. I wanted to show the title. Just a second. These are the little tricky things doing. There he is. He's the god of fire.
This is Hephaestus.
He was named by the Greek Hephaestos, which is the current word in Greek for volcano.
Okay.
Whereas the Romans, the ancient Romans, they adopted simply the god from the Greek and changed his name into Vulcan, or Vulcanus, which obviously is the origin of the word volcano. And he was said to have his forge within Etna. Sometimes he also moved to the island of Vulcano or even Stromboli, but Etna was the main seat, and there he was hammering on the hot iron to produce lightning bolts for the big boss of the gods, Zeus.
For Zeus, yes.
Jupiter. And each time the hammer came down on the iron, he made a loud bang. And we still hear these bangs every now and then. People get pretty upset about them because they're very loud, and sometimes they can also come at very low frequencies, very low sound frequencies, so that we can't hear them, but we feel them. It's called infrasound. It makes everything vibrate, and it makes people extremely nervous. It's a very strong psychological phenomenon, and this is one of the many legends which exist about Etna. There's the legend of the Cyclones.
This is wonderful. I had no idea that actually there's a almost direct link between the legend of Smith, or well, volcano banging, and there's these bangs actually going on. So the legend tells you something about the natural phenomena as it's observed. Oh, fantastic!
It is something that, thing that I used indeed a lot when I made public conferences online this year with schools and people, to tell them, look, don't get worried about these bangs and about these infrasound which shakes everything. It's just the god of fire being back to work. He's been there since the old Greek and before. And it's nothing dangerous. It just can just disturb your sleep, obviously, during the night.
That's great. No, then I'm not so worried. I think I need to be more worried about being hit by a lightning bolt if I anger Zeus, but that's a different story altogether. So.
That's actually one of the main dangers when you go on Etna, because it's a big mountain. And when you're on a mountain in a thunderstorm, you become a lightning rod. But
so that is part of the... Oh, I see. The legend is quite good. Oh, yeah.
It's got a lot of true parts to it.
it's like an ancient kind of hazard catalog, and wonderful.
Yeah, on Etna, you meet a lot of ancient and new legends and spiritual things, and you can talk eternally about how Etna is being viewed by the people here as a sort of a super mama. So lots of really, really amazing things, and also make people rationalize when they personify an object which is very alive, like an active volcano, then it becomes more understandable and less frightening. Maybe you respect it more, but you when you understand, then the fear diminishes. So that's what we are working on. We try to make people lose the fear and teach respect and understanding, because what we fear is what we do not know.
That's right. And yes, I think once we personify or anthropologize, I guess is the word, these natural forces, we feel we have a more direct link to it. We can understand it better. We might even be able to plead to it, take up communication. And I think it helps a lot. I was involved in some efforts in Indonesia where local legends were used and taught to school kids. And indeed, it seems that the hazard awareness and the behavior in a crisis was improving dramatically because of these different aspects that were brought in. It's very hard for some people to fully grasp what the seismometer tells you, but when you have this kind of legend people grew up with and you link it to the phenomena you see, you might be able to emotionally understand the situation a little better and make a good decision in that case. So I'm delighted to hear that this is what's happening there. Wonderful. And I'm also glad that you closed off with this more cultural and spiritual aspect, because I personally think that besides the agricultural advantages and the tourist industry, there's something quite magic about volcanoes. I certainly think I feel it when I'm there. So I guess that brings us to the end. Boris, thank you for your time. This has been wonderful. I really enjoyed that. And I guess I need to come back to our little kind of fieldwork session that we mentioned earlier. Hopefully I'll get vaccinated soon, and then I'll make some preparations for that.
And we might do a live a live Facebook or whatever during field work, maybe with Etna erupting in the background.
That would be fantastic. And
let's work on this.
I think I told my family as well that Etna is one of the things on my list, and they all said, "Oh, we want to come, we want to come." So it's gonna be fantastic.
Welcome. Etna's here; it's not moving away.
Fantastic. That's great. Well, then I say goodbye for today. Thank you very much, and we'll be in touch anyway. And have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, same to you and everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye. All the best. Good luck, Boris.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.